Good boy. Yeah, you a good boy over there. Good boy. Good boy doing good boy stuff over there. All right. Sad music, man. Okay. Scott, did you insult me and then decide to retract it? Is that what happened? That's how I took it. Just so you know. Just want you to know I'm very offended. There. Look at that. Beautiful. Well, at least you admitted it. Admission is the first step to healing. That's what they say. It's AA and NA rules, at least. I suppose. This music is so sad. The title of this one was interesting. It's clickbait. It's not, though. Sounds like clickbait, though, huh? It is just Paul. It is just 2 Corinthians. That's all. Another normal day. This music is, like, sad. Not a fan. Not into it. Can I have something else, please? Something less sad, perhaps? Chill, lo-fi beats. Your time to shine. See how you do. Sounds like Zelda music. God, man, does that take me back. N64. The good old days. Mystic, what's going on? Oh, Mystic should have managing more. That's better. Yes, we got to see our first ultrasound today. Dude, that's awesome. That's so exciting. So exciting. Are you guys going to wait to find out the gender? Are you those people? Or are you going to know ahead of time? The floof. Kat is getting her nails done. I don't know how she's magically in the Discord voice channel. Unless she's forcing the ladies at the nail salon to listen. Probably not the
No,
night
I'm
for
here.
it. Oh, okay. Are you home?
No.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right.
No, I will be very soon.
Oh, good. Okay, so we're gonna wait a few minutes, and then Pastora, and then we'll see. But the poll ended in having a debate, which I'm down to have, but we have to have both parties because that's how debate works. In case anyone was unaware, so depending on how that goes, we'll see. So I figure Well, at least start. Chapter 13 is super short, and then 14 is super good. So if the debate falls through, we're just going to do a Bible study, which is the plan to begin with, if you remember. So always bank on Bible study, and then if we can roll into something else, we will. Otherwise, we will have like very scheduled ahead of time debates. This was kind of like different. This was just an issue that we had that if people wanted to hash it out, we could, which I'm still down for. So as long as everybody gets here and we have two parties to have the debate, then we can do that. But for the time being, we're just going to go through 13, which is where the title of the video comes from. So it's not clickbait. That's 2 Corinthians. He talked about this also in 1 Corinthians, so it's not a surprise, or shouldn't be. But the concept of women, not just, it's actually in 14, but the concept of women to be, that women are to be quiet in church. We've talked about it a lot already, but we'll go into it again, and maybe in more depth, and maybe other people will have more interesting things to say. But 13 continues on from what we were talking about on Sunday, which is the whole thing with spiritual gifts. Speaking in tongues being kind of the issue at Corinth, because they are a society of well-to-do people, of social status being above all, of a very, very harsh spectrum from rich to poor. There was basically no middle class at all. You were either considered wealthy, essentially, or you were considered poor, causing all kinds of problems in the church already. And then Paul gets to the topic of spiritual gifts, where he's talking about how tongues have been elevated to this really undeserving, weird status of spirituality. Spirituality being something that the Corinthian people were obsessed with, because spirituality meant that you were of the high social status, which was predominantly rich people. So we talked about that last week. This is a continuation of it. So in 13, he says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, which we've talked about also, this of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. I've said this before, but if you've never read I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong. No, we're good, right? Hold on, because now I'm like second guessing myself. Am I in the wrong spot? No, right? No, we're good. I don't know why I said 2 Corinthians earlier. It's 1 Corinthians. That would have been real bad. But I've said this before, but 1 Corinthians 13, if you read it in the Message translation, not good for study, but it's very poetic. And the way that the Message does this section of Scripture, 13 out of 1 Corinthians in the Message, it's really, really good. It's really pretty. So if you ever get 2 minutes, because it's very short, go read it in the Message. 1 Corinthians 13, because the way that they worded it is just really, really good. It's very poetic. It's really well written. But he said, if I speak in tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. A couple things. The angels bit. We've had a bit of debate about it. There is no clear answer, in my opinion, at all. I'd be really hard pressed if somebody said they knew exactly what that meant or what he was referring to. An opinion from not me, but a relatively accepted opinion that the reference to the tongues of angels could indicate the belief that one type of gift of tongues, this type of gift of tongues, involves speaking the language of the angels, right? Which is kind of, it's like I said, it's a relatively well accepted belief that speaking in tongues is kind of sorry about that. Here you go. Is kind of the language of the angels, right? And it's the way that you communicate with God, which we can talk about. It's just it's an odd thing, and there's no answers to it. But that's the most accepted interpretation of what he's talking about right there. And he said, but have not love. What he's talking about is the genuine and selfless concern for people, the well-being of people, that type of love. He's identifying that it's the greatest of the three Christian virtues, which is a really important thing. And it's kind of what I've been ranting about the past week, is that unity comes from love. And I screamed and swore about unity. Unity, it is derived out of love. Unity can't really exist if like love isn't present. It can, but in a church setting, it can't. Love kind of has to be the fundamental part of that. And Paul is super clear that love is the most important thing of anything. And he kind of takes it to a pretty far spot, to a pretty far place, that he exaggerates that love is absolutely essential. It's super important, and that it is the greatest of the three Christian virtues. He chastises the wealthy Corinthian people because they did not demonstrate this, where they weren't acting out of love. They weren't acting in love to the less wealthy Corinthian believers. The Lord's Supper, we talked about, and then now within the context of this section of chapters, it's in the context of spiritual gifts. Then he said, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Just for context, I guess. Everybody kind of knows what that means, but people used cymbals to worship pagan gods of the time. So even though like modern day mind, you can understand what he's saying already, like you get it, to have the added historical context is just, it's helpful. So understanding that this is something they were doing in the pagan worship ceremonies, which to take it further, that wasn't just outside of the church, because this church specifically was engaging in pagan ceremonies. They were going to pagan rituals, and they were bringing some of that stuff back into the church. So he's using an example that really hits home hard, because it's something they were doing. It was the god of wine specifically, where symbols were very much a part of the actual ritual. So he is mentioning the clashing cymbal to kind of suggest that spiritual gifts without love, they make the Corinthian people the same as pagans, which he said several times throughout this text, because he's kind of upset that they're doing these pagan things and they're involved in the pagan rituals. And if I have prophetic powers, and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith, so as to remove mountains. So if I have enough faith to literally move mountains, but I don't love, I am nothing. And this is what I meant when I said he kind of takes it to a pretty far place. He's really exaggerating that love is absolute, and it is absolutely necessary in the function of a church. That's a really strong thing to say and a really strong way to say it, especially considering Paul was not really a poetic guy. That's kind of poetic. If I have prophetic powers, which is a pretty massive gift to have, that's in context too, because it's what they've been talking about, and I understand all mysteries and all knowledge, if I get everything, and that hits harder too, because the Corinthians specifically, hold on. The Corinthians specifically were all about the knowledge. If you remember, the philosophers of the time, really big deal. Social status, all of these things are interconnected. So he's tying them together. Prophetic powers were seen as a very high spiritual gift as well, kind of like tongues. So he's saying, if I have prophetic powers, big deal, and I understand all the mysteries and all knowledge, so you're also a hoity-toity philosopher type, which is a big deal, and I have all of the faith, so much so that I can move mountains, but I don't love, I'm absolutely nothing. It's just really strong. It's very strong. 3, if I gave away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Continuing on with this really strong language, super strong language. Your translation might say something different in the beginning of 3. If I give away all I have, if I parcel out all my possessions, it means what it means. But what he's doing is he's referencing back to Jesus, right? He commanded the commandment to the rich young man out of Matthew and out of Luke. He's echoing the story. That's why it has a bit more significance. And then when he says, if I deliver my body up to be burned, he's specifically referencing execution of martyrdom by fire, which was something that was happening. So offering yourself as a sacrifice for the cause is what was happening. We've talked about that too, that Christians, it's one of the good cases for Christianity is that people were super happy to be burned alive, no problem, which is kind of an indication then maybe they're not lying. Maybe they really believe this and are pretty confident in what they're saying if they're down to die in pretty atrocious ways. So just a continuation of really strong language. Joe, I think I get why you opened this specific conversation with this. Look, this is all happenstance. It's all happenstance. That's the beautiful thing about this. I didn't curate any of this. All of this just kind of fell into line. We're just continuing on our normal schedule of Bible study. It just happened to work out this way. I did nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. Irony, 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 irony. When you're talking about unity. When a church is having problems in the body. How ironic. Love is the absolute greatest of all Christian virtues. What is love? Well, it's patient and kind. You'd probably have unity if you had those things. When people lose their patience and they lose their kindness, unity begins to disintegrate. Love does not envy or boast. You might not have that in your church, so doing okay. It is not arrogant. There's probably some arrogance around. Many times, oftentimes, there is arrogance involved in disagreements, right? It's pretty common. So it is not arrogant. So if you're following the greatest of all Christian virtues, arrogance is not a part of that. It also is not rude. Ironic. Don't be rude. It does not insist on its own way. The irony continues. And it is not irritable or resentful. If everybody really, but if all of the people who have had issues with anybody else in the past handful of months, if you're not feeling a little bit convicted, you might need to do something about that. You might need to do some introspective work. I feel it just in a general sense, for sure. But I also haven't really been a part of some of the things that have been going on. This is one of those times where, like, if you're not following these things, you're messing up. It's a failure. You are failing. So be better. Do better. It's not okay. Is the honest, like, that's the honest pastoral thing to say. If this is not the love that you are engaging in, specifically in the body, in what you call your church, you are failing. You need to do better. And no, it is not okay. It's not okay. And that's the shit you're not going to get out of church, like in today's world. You should, because it's not okay. It's not okay. 6, it does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. So a couple of things. Going back up to 5, when it mentions being rude, and it does not insist on its own way, and it is not irritable or resentful, reminder that the wealthy Corinthians, in context again, not me lecturing, the wealthy Corinthians, they had been dishonoring, which is where this comes from, the poor believers there. We've read a lot about it. We've talked a lot about it. Significant problem. It's for them. Some of the Corinthian women also dishonored themselves. And we're going to see some of that in chapter 14 if we get there. Which I assume we are. Because I think we are still lacking primary parties for the whole debate. Then it does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. So the Greek word that Paul chose, it refers to the gospel. So not truth in general, but it rejoices with the truth. The truth being the gospel message, which will stand in direct opposition of unrighteousness. That's what he's talking about. Love rejoices in that truth, in this truth. Because what the gospel does is it kind of gives you this blueprint and it shows you what God's love is. And that's supposed to be what is followed. 7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. more of a reference to enduring difficulties. So he's talking about it bears all things or it endures all things, depending on your translation. It's difficulties, issues, problems. It's a poke at what was going on between the people at the church. You all need to bear each other because there will be issues, there will be difficulties. But also it takes on it's got a spiritual nature to it. The difficulties of other people, the problems of other people, the arguments of other people, the requirement for compassion, and the presence of the spiritual nature are things to like keep at the top of your mind. Hey, love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. Love never ends. It will never become something that is invalid or dead in any way. The Corinthians were all about the tongues. Big deal. They were all about the prophecy. Big deal. Why? Because of status. It makes you look good. It makes you look very spiritual, which is the same thing that the false prophets at Corinth were doing with their pseudo-Christian philosophy, is they were packaging all of Paul's teachings and they were making it sound better, but making it not be the truth anymore, using the truth as the gospel. That's what they were doing. That's what he's talking about. And again, for the 1,000th time, in my opinion, that's what today has become, is we have this new packaged Christianity that sounds really good. It captures attention, but it's not the truth anymore. It's not the gospel anymore. It's become something else. It's got some gospel in it for sure, but it's not the gospel anymore. Sad thing. Yeah, good enough. 9, for we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When the perfect comes. The Greek word is what it's referring to, what he's referring to, is God's salvation. That's the perfect. And that is what comes in this context with the second coming. The revelatory status, or the revelatory ending, I mean. All right, hold on. Let me look at this real quick. So, like, what he's saying isn't symbolic. We think of noising a gong and get the concept. They were actually doing it literally. Yeah, which is why, like, I felt like I needed to point it out. But still, it's one of those things that, like, we just read through it in the Bible and it makes sense to you, and we think that's good enough. I don't think that's good enough. I think, like, you need to know why. It can still make sense and still you be sitting there ignorant as hell, having no idea what he was actually talking about. That's what he was actually talking about. The reference to the gong was a literal reference to what many of the Corinthian people were doing, the Christian people were doing in pagan temples. It's like, to me, that's super significant. And to me, like, that's the difference between the sheep Christian who like kind of get it and float through life, and the people who like really understand what was actually happening, which means you really understand what is happening today, in my opinion, a lot more. I think it's important. Contrary to the Thessalonians, whose Christ-like loving ways, Paul wrote extended even to Macedonia. Truth. The logos at work. That's big man upstairs working overtime. I was once told to take those words and replace with love with your spouse's name. Really opened my eyes. Yeah, actually, I forgot about that. I think Kat showed me that during COVID. Was that 13? It was. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. People who are married, you should do that. Or if you're dating, you should do that. I forgot you showed me that. So Kat showed me during COVID something, I don't know, something on, I don't remember what she showed me, but showed me something where they took 1 Corinthians 13, and every time it says love, you replace it with your spouse's name. And it flows still. And it was actually really interesting. Yeah, I forgot all about that. You guys should do that. It's interesting to see. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, they, quote, your goodness and your love, I may add, must have some edge to it, else it is none. I mean, I agree. Because can you really love somebody without there being some kind of edge? Because circumstances are never perfect and people are never perfect. And if there's no edge, it means you're not being honest. And if you're not being honest, can you say that you really love somebody? I struggle with that. So I like the way that he said that. That's really good. I was going to say, I think wrongdoing and the truth are interesting posed as opposite. Yeah. Yeah. I allow love to relate to through me. Oh, Pastor is a doll. I'm so glad Pastor is back. Yeah, the gong was literal. It's a problem, man. They don't teach it. It's weird. It's weird to me. Instead, it's a story about his dog. Just not into it. It's not for me. They were hyperbolizing Paul's message, thus devaluing Jesus's gospel of truth. Very well said. Very well said. If you put his name in there and it's not true, then he's not your man, baby girl. That's right, baby girl. That's right. That's right. All right. 9. Nope. 11. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. Like a child. Greek word is in reference to a young child. So a child, think of a child under 10 years old. There are many behaviors, there are many actions that children of a young age take. Again, irony is many of the ways that children act are the ways that aren't cohesive with verse 4. So being patient and kind. Children at a certain age, many times, might still be kind, but do they have patience? Not often. Kids lack patience. Do they envy and boast? Yeah, a lot of kids do. There are a lot of jealousy issues, and there are a lot of pride issues in children. It's a very normal thing. Many children are arrogant. Many children are rude. Many children insist on their own way, and many children are irritable and resentful. So it's a pretty damn good comparison that Paul's making between a mature adult and a child. The reference, actually, is that the Corinthian people as adult believers are immature children, and he wants them to be adults, doing adult things and behaving as such. And he's not seeing that. And so he's being kind of an asshole, which you know I love. 12. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. These are your Christian virtues. Faith, hope, and love. What annoys the absolute hell out of me is that this has become a Christian trope. Faith, hope, and love. It's on banners in your house. It's on clothes. It's on bumper stickers. It's on your backpack. It's everywhere. It's everywhere to the point, to the degree, that it lacks any actual meaning, which is obnoxious. These things should be they should be sacred. To a point, they should be sacred. Faith as a concept is a crazy thing. It's a really crazy thing. Hope, likewise, is pretty crazy if you actually sit and think about it, you really sit and think about it. And so is love. I'm going to skip the YouTube ad. Sorry if anybody got it. They're all insane things for people to do, for human beings to do. They seem contrary to our nature because they kind of are. In a spiritual Christian sense, but also in a literal sense, in a secular sense. faith, hope, and love from a secular perspective are dangerous. Having faith is dangerous. Being hopeful about something, not confident in something, is dangerous. And loving people is dangerous. From a fight or flight survival perspective, as a secular person, where all we're here to do is live and then die, the whole goal of life is to get the best life I can get. That means self-preservation. So from a secular perspective, those things are horrible. They're dangerous things. But also from a Christian, like a spiritual perspective, if you come from that background and that belief system, it's equally as insane. If you actually think about it, and you're not a brainwashed, brain-dead Christian, really think about it. Having faith in the things that we believe is kind of crazy. It takes something. Even for those of us who are like very analytical about our belief, where there was no warm, fuzzy moment, Jesus never showed up in my bedroom or something and taught me the story of life. It was an academic journey over many years of like, this makes the most sense. And then some spiritual development from there. It's an insane thing to actually think about. Loving people is kind of a crazy thing to do. To commit your life to somebody, to be willing to die for somebody. Like I would be absolutely willing to die for the people that are closest to me. No doubt, no hesitation. That's crazy. It's an insane thing. And it's become completely watered down and it annoys the hell out of me. So I'll stop ranting about it right now. Can't spell knowledge without edge. That's good. I like that. For the record, I never skip your YouTube ads if I get them. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I do appreciate it. All of that, again, just so we're all clear, goes right into the Discord stuff, just so you know. Never has a YouTube check hit my bank account, ever. It goes to a floating account that just goes right back to pay for this stuff, just so we're all on the same page. All right, I know for a fact we're not doing the debate because necessary parties are not here. So 14, this is when we get into what the title of this video was, which is Women to be Quiet in Church. We have talked about this, I feel like, kind of a lot. So hopefully we can go at it from a little bit of a different angle. And then I know some people who are here now were not with us when we did go over this last. So prophecy in tongues. It's important to understand that this is the new context. This is your greater context. Now, prophecy in tongues, again, because it was the greater context of 12 as well. So he goes into 12, talking about spiritual gifts, talking about unity in the church, irony that they're connected. Then he goes into 13, talking about what we just read, which is kind of a continuation of what is unity. Well, it is love at the basis of it. And then he added more beautiful poetic detail about it. Now he's funneling back in to spiritual gifts in what that looks like when it's practiced in church, with the thought in mind that he's not talking to you, baby girl. None of this, in fact, was written to you. It wasn't about you. He didn't have you in mind. In fact, you didn't exist. So if you take any of this personally, as if it's about you, with all love and respect, here's the edge. You're dumb. You're not a bright person. So you need to get yourself right, not get offended, because nobody cared about you when this was written. Nobody. Not one person. Because nobody who is alive to have cared about you knew you because you were not alive to be cared about. Now with that out of the way, be nice. Pursue love and earnestly desire the spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. Starts it strong. That's specific. Earnestly desire the spiritual gifts, but says pursue love first. The interesting thing, again, that you just read right over and you don't think about, is he kind of just summed up the past 2 chapters. Right there, snap, it's done. Pursue love being number 1, because what did he say? Well, he said it's the most important of the 3 Christian virtues. Cool, he nailed it. Earnestly desire the spiritual gifts. That covers chapter 12. Especially that you may prophecy. Still a tag on 12, and then he's continue on here. For one who speaks in a tongue speaks not to men, but to God. For no one understands him, but he utters mysteries in the spirit. I don't know if you guys want to go super into this again deep, because we just recently did with the whole tongues thing and what does it mean. I think everybody's kind of expressed their opinion about it. You're going to see some contradictory concepts here, which, yeah, I mentioned it last time. I was honest when I said that there is some indication in scripture that speaking in tongues is actually a thing, and that it's not just the transcribing languages or translating languages. There is also heavy indication that it is, and there is no absolute clarity at all, but there's enough to kind of get both sides of that aisle feeling very confident about their belief. So in a lot of this, I'm going to read you what some of the most accepted interpretations of it, what they are, and then we'll talk about it more if you guys want to. If there's anything you want me to stop on, let me know. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat as much as I can. But just understand, that's where I'm coming from. A lot of this is not going to be my opinion. I'm going to express what kind of the most agreed upon interpretations of them are. And then we'll just see what happens from there. For one who speaks in tongues speaks not to men, but to God. For no one understands him, but he utters mysteries in the spirit. On the other hand, the one who prophesies speaks to people for their upbuilding and encouragement and consolation. Speaking in tongues does not benefit people, is essentially what he's saying. Prophecy does, which is why he started, desire the spiritual gifts, especially prophecy. He expanded on it right there. He's explaining why. Why did he call out tongues specifically and none of the other ones? Well, because all of 12 was basically about how the Corinthian believers were obsessed with speaking in tongues. And he thought that a lot of them were full of shit and being fake and not using it properly. So that's why he's calling that out specifically. The one who speaks in tongues speaks not to men, but to God, for no one understands him. That conflicts with other parts of the same epistle where he says you need to have a translator. Well, a translator would have to understand him to be able to translate. They don't quite connect. They don't quite make sense. Some of it will be explained, but a lot of it is kind of left in the air if you're being honest, which I think is the right way to go. Don't be too confident on either side because we just don't have the information to be able to be, in my opinion. On the other hand, again, the one who prophesies speaks to people for their upbuilding and encouragement. So what he's saying, again, is that tongues don't really benefit the body. They don't really benefit people. They're more of a private matter, which also there's a contradiction there somewhere else, but they're more of a private matter in this section, whereas prophecy benefits the body. Everybody should have something to gain from a prophetic message. Everybody stands to gain something from that. It benefits the body. It consoles people, he said. The one who speaks in a tongue builds himself up, but the one who prophesies builds up the church. That's really important because it's really hard to argue with that, right? The one who speaks in tongues builds up himself, but the one who prophesies builds up the church. One is for you, one is for everyone. What was he saying in 12 was that spiritual gifts are not for you, baby girl. They're for everybody. So if a spiritual gift is just benefiting you, if it's making you feel good about yourself, if it's elevating your social status in the church or otherwise, then it is probably not actually a spiritual gift. You are probably just a fraud. Because spiritual gifts are intended to be communal. They're intended for others to benefit from them. That is why you have them. They're not for you. It's a telling sign of whether someone is genuine or not, is who does that benefit the most? If it is you, Red flag. Now I want you all to speak in tongues. Here's where it gets a bit tough, but even more prophecy. So on one hand, we're being told what I just said, which is that spiritual gifts are not for you, they're for the body. And then he pushes that prophecy is greater than tongues. He says that tongues only benefit you and not the body. And then he says he wants you to speak in tongues. It's conflicting at least. And it's something you just kind of have to wrestle with. Now, I want you all to speak in tongues, but even more prophecy. The one who prophesies is greater than the one who speaks in tongues. There's no question about what he believes is the greater of the two. There is question about if one is something you should even do because it doesn't benefit the body, it benefits the individual. He goes on, unless someone interprets so that the church may be built up. And that's where you get your explanation. So if tongues is being used in a communal setting, then there is an argument for it being a valid spiritual gift, I guess. It's hard, but it's harder to live. What did I miss? Is it harder to live or die for the people you love? That's an interesting question. I think it's harder to live for them, for sure. Because you have to live. I mean, when you die, is anything hard? It's an interesting worded question, but I think it's kind of simple, actually. It would be harder to live for someone you love because you have to live for them. If you die, like if I save someone I love, it's not hard for me anymore because I'm dead. Unless, like, we're talking philosophically, I guess, but. It might be harder to live for the ones you love. One takes a lifetime of dedication, the other ends in an instant. Yeah, agreed. It's not an overnight thing for sure. Mikkel said, oh, there's Ruth. Hey, Ruth. Also, how can we think Paul isn't poetic when he puts chapter 12, 13, and 14 back to back, and the order is so good, and one of my favorite chunks of the Bible? I'm going to be the jerk. He didn't make the chapters. You have to remember that. This was all just bunched up together. You were here. I think you were here when we were talking. Maybe you came in late last week. We talked about this a little bit last week. In 1 Corinthians, there are 6 actual separations in the text. 6. How many chapters are there? Double? Almost triple? Double? More than double. A little bit more than double. Meaning, people along in history just decided where the chapters went. So it's very, very, very likely, in my opinion, I'm super confident of it, that 12, 13, and 14 were not separated at all. They were all one chunk, which is why they're very cohesive. The Bible gatherers of history decided that they wanted to break these things up and then number them and try to make it easier for people to, one, find location in the Bible, but 2, kind of take in the content separately, but also together. Whereas, like, you would have just got this on one big ass scribe, right? It'd just be one big thing that you'd have to unroll and kind of read all at once. It's one of those weird things, like, you don't think about it until you think about it. And then you're like, oh, wow. But he was poetic, man. He had edge. He was rough sometimes. Can tongues mean logic? Not implying it does, just a thought experiment. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. I don't know if there's really anything to back it. If you end up looking into that, I would be very interested to hear what you find. I think you'd have a hard time. I like it because I don't like the concept of tongues in a general sense, but I think it'd be hard to make that work. To me, anyway, it seems like a solid and agreed upon definition of tongues is vague and confusing. So maybe it could be something like that ghost, like that go since the rest of the gifts have more tangible images? Something more like what Ghost said, I assume is what you meant. Mikhail said, and I wonder why people are so enthusiastic about speaking in tongues. Is it because it is the easiest spiritual gift to counterfeit? I think that, and just it's no different today than it was then. It's like it looks spiritual to the ignorant person. To the ignorant person who's gullible, they see that and they're like, oh, wow, they're speaking a totally different language that I have no idea what they're saying. That's super fancy. It's kind of like prophecy. That's why these two are always held the highest in the Bible. It's because even then it was like a social status thing. Well, why? It's kind of obvious if you think about it. You're speaking a different language that nobody knows. Nobody knows. But then all of a sudden, maybe there's a guy there who does know what you're saying. But then also maybe that guy's just full of shit too. So like one, you're babbling, saying nothing. And then the interpreter has no idea what you're saying, but then interprets. And because you both have to lie to keep the con going, the guy who's babbling is just like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I said. Even though in his head, he's like, no, I wasn't saying anything. I was just babbling. It's an agreed upon lie, I think, in many situations. Even if it's real and people do it genuinely, I think there are absolutely churches where people, it's an agreed upon lie between the babbler and the interpreter. And it's really disgusting. It's fraud. Of the worst kind, it's fraud. Logic is a tongue. That is fair. I mean, I see where you're coming from with it. I'd be interested, man. If you go into it, I'd be interested. I would definitely be down to talk about it. I'd be definitely down to talk about it. I thought you weren't to speak unless you had a translator. Right. But then also there's indication that you're to do it in private where there's no translator. So it's just you and God. And realistically, I've only seen people do it where there's no translator. The mega church that I told you guys about a handful of weeks ago, where they were all doing it, and then I got talked to after because I refused to do it, they had no translator. Everybody was literally just babbling in a room. It was the most awkward, ridiculous thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was very uncomfortable. All right, continuing on, because this is kind of long. We may only get through partial, we'll see. Now, brothers, if I come to you speaking in tongues, how will I benefit you unless I bring you some revelation or knowledge or prophecy or teaching? He's being really smart with the way he worded that, because the rest of that, they're all spiritual gifts. He's a smart dude, man. So if I come to you speaking in tongues, how will I benefit you unless I bring you another spiritual gift? He's, in a way, he's invalidating it. Right? Do you guys get that? Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say? If I come to you speaking in tongues, how will I benefit you unless I actually come to you with a different spiritual gift? It's kind of, it's very smart. It's very smart. Revelation, knowledge, prophecy, or teaching. These are all things that are linked to different spiritual gifts. So how can I benefit you with tongues unless I benefit you with a different spiritual gift? It's always been a very interesting sentence to me. If even lifeless instruments, such as the flute or the harp, do not give distinct notes, how will anyone know what is played? Talking about speaking in tongues. How will anyone know what the hell you're talking about? And if the bugle gives an indistinct sound, who will get ready for battle? So with yourselves, if with your tongue you utter speech that is not intelligible, how will anyone know what is said? For you will be speaking into the air. It seems pretty obvious that Paul kind of feels a certain way about the whole speaking in tongues thing. But to be fair, on the other hand, the Corinthians had gone really, really far with it. So maybe because of how far they went with it, he feels the need to really try to put them in check. So maybe he's really downplaying tongues just to the Corinthian church. And that is a high probability option because we don't see it anywhere else. So as much as I don't like tongues and I'm not really into it, that's the honest exegetical analysis of it, is that it really could go either way. It would make perfect sense that it's just a Corinth thing because they had gone too far. And so now he's still telling them it's valid, like he said earlier, it's valid, it's real, it's important, but this is more important. This is more important. And if you speak in a way that is not intelligible, how will anyone know what you said? You'll be speaking into thin air. You'll be playing instruments with no notes. It seems a lot more to be a downplay, not so much an invalidation. There are doubtless many different languages in the world, and this is where many of us get our beliefs that it has more to do with language, but it's still not a clean answer. And none is without meaning. There are doubtless many different languages in the world, and none is without meaning. But if I do not know the meaning of the language, I will be a foreigner. I like barbarian better, because that is what, in my opinion, better translations use. Not a foreigner, a barbarian. Because when you go back to the Greek, they were referred to as barbarians. Someone who did not speak Greek was a barbarian. Again, it's one of those things again. Could you read this and still understand what is being said? For sure. But they're completely robbing you of the historical context of what Paul's talking about, which I think is important. The Greek term is barbarian. And the reason is because those people who did not speak Greek were looked down on, and they were called barbarians. It's an important part of like the historical context, in my opinion. The Greeks could not conquer the Romans. Non-Greeks were considered barbarians, not foreigners. Foreigners is very clean. It's very clean. It's very nice. It's pro-social. Barbarian is an insult, and that is what he actually said. That's the actual Greek. This is an example of people in history being evil in a sense. To change the Bible when you don't need to, when it doesn't actually add anything, you're just trying to be pro-social, is to remove the truth. It's a lie. It's evil. It's demonic. You leave that shit in. You leave it the way it was. There's absolutely no need to remove barbarian and put foreigner unless you're just being evil and you're trying to cloud people's understanding of the Bible. I've heard a lot of stories of people talking about themselves, talking in tongues, but I don't think I've ever heard it myself. Interesting. They were the very first Pentecostals. Mocha, I think that's what Joe pointed out was the inconsistency between the verses. I thought we weren't to speak. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, there's a lot of inconsistencies, so that's one of them. But there's a lot. That's the problem. There's nothing but inconsistencies about the whole thing about tongues. What tongues actually is, whether we're to do it or not, whether there needs to be an interpreter or not, whether it's important or not. It's one of the really, really hard ones to actually know what's going on. But again, we don't get anything negative about tongues anywhere else in the Bible, just here. Which, as much as I hate it, you have to be honest and say, okay, well, this is very likely he was just kind of pushing down tongues at Corinth because they were using it inappropriately, which would imply that it's real to some degree, which I don't like because I have a hard time believing it. But it's kind of what the text points you to. Maybe Isaiah posted a cringe video of himself speaking it, but that's about it. I don't know who that is. Isaiah Saldivar. Is this someone I need to look up? Is this someone that I should become familiar with? I feel like as a Catholic, I think of speaking in tongues as a bad thing, like it's evil or from the devil. But I can't honestly say where that belief came from. Well, it would make sense just in like mainstream media, not mainstream media, like Hollywood. Speaking in tongues is always like in movies been tied to exorcisms. Maybe that's where, I don't know. But that's one place that my mind goes. That's kind of the Hollywood exorcism, is that they babble, similar to what some tongues sound like. I've seen people speak gibberish when I was younger. They were a crazy family. I was friends with one of their boys because it's clandestine in nature. Huh? Oh no, Joe, talk about a rabbit hole. Oh yeah, it's endless. It's totally endless. The tongues thing is something that I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours and years trying to build an academic answer for, and it's one of the ones I just had to give up on. I never believed in tongues until I understood once and after my husband told me he heard the same. So we gaslit ourselves that it never happened, so we don't have to believe. That's free. Well, so what does that have to do with tongues, though? You guys, I don't know, maybe explain more. Maybe I'm not understanding. Like, you guys heard someone speaking in tongues and you both thought the same thing and like told each other the same thing later. I'd be interested to hear. I'm always very interested in the stories about tongues. I just have a very hard time, because I believe the interesting thing, I guess, is that I think tongues today is no different than back then, in that like today, the Church of America, the Church of the world, is Corinth. It's predominantly people who are full of shit, who are con artists, or who just want attention. And therefore, if it is real, they've completely muddied the water for all of the people who are actually using it. Same though with prophets. You have all of these prophets on TikTok and shit. And like maybe there are some people with like true prophetic ability that all the TikTok prophets are completely muddying the water. So nobody believes them. Nobody knows about them. I acknowledge that is a possibility. And I wouldn't see it as like an unlikely possibility. It's probably a pretty likely possibility. All right, 10. There are doubtless many different languages. Nope, we already read that. 12. So with yourselves, since you are eager for manifestation of the Spirit, manifestation of the Spirit, strive to excel in building up the church. Therefore, one who speaks in tongues or in a tongue should pray that he may interpret. Continue to be confused, my friends. One who speaks in a tongue should pray that he may interpret. You got to love it. For if I pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is unfruitful. Another way of saying that would be my mind is unproductive, would be unuseful. The belief of what is being said, to choose my words carefully. The lacking of interpretation could indicate that the person talking, the speaker, is not there to benefit in an intellectual, spiritual, or helpful way. Meaning, if there's no one there to interpret, it's essentially fake. Or at the very least, it's useless because nobody will benefit from it. What am I to do? I will pray with my spirit, but I will pray with my mind also. I will sing praise with my spirit, but I will sing with my mind also. Otherwise, if you give thanks with your spirit, how can anyone in the position of an outsider say amen to your thanksgiving when he does not know what you are saying? If you give thanks with your spirit, how can anyone in the position of an outsider say amen to your thanksgiving when he does not know what you're saying? How can someone benefit when they don't know what is going on? For you may be giving thanks well enough, but the other person is not being built up. I love that term. He said it 3 times already in what we've read tonight. Built up. This has also like become kind of a Christian trope, but I think it's something that you need to rewire your brain for. I'm going to skip the ad. Sorry if anybody got it. Being built up. It coincides with the Christian virtues, faith, hope, and love. Love being the greatest of the 3. Being built up is the conclusion to all spiritual gifts. It should be. Otherwise, biblically, they're being misused or they are a fraud. The body being built up by the individuals being built up collectively is the absolute conclusion of all spiritual gifts and practice. Otherwise, they're not real. That's it. And I love the terminology because it's very good. It indicates like it never ends. You don't get built up to completion. You get built up perpetually, consistently. So if the body or individuals that create the body or make the body, if they slip away from doing what they should be doing, if they slip away from the Christian virtues, if they slip away from proper use of spiritual gifts, the body will stop being built up and it will decay. And that's kind of what happens. Like a lot, often, perpetually. 18. I thank God that I speak in tongues more than all of you. What a statement. I thank God that I speak tongues more than all of you. Nevertheless, in church, I would rather speak 5 words with my mind in order to instruct others than 10,000 in a tongue. The emphasis is undeniable. Again, the question is this for all of Christianity or is this for Corinth? Because they were putting tongues on such a pedestal. That's the question. I like to think it's for all of Christianity, but I'm open and I understand that I could be wrong because of what I know about the Bible. It's very likely it's just for Corinth, as much as I hate it. But what he's saying is I would rather have you teach the truth, speak the gospel in 5 words than 10,000 in a tongue. It's really emphatic. I'd rather you teach people using 5 words about the gospel than 10,000 words in a tongue. Brothers, do not be children in your way of thinking. Be infants in evil, but in your thinking be mature. In the law, it is written, by people of strange tongues and by the lips of foreigners, barbarians, will I speak to this people. And even then, they will not listen to me, says the Lord. Thus, tongues are a sign not for believers, but for unbelievers, while prophecy is a sign not for unbelievers, but for believers. The indication is that the tongues are meant to be a way of seeing the activity of the supernatural, to see the activity of God. Who is that for? It's for the non-believer. Whereas prophecy is something that he's saying would benefit the believers because it would bring up something for you to be aware of. It would build up the body in some sense. And like you said earlier, it would console. There's a consolation aspect to it. 23. If therefore the whole church comes together and all speak in tongues, and outsiders or unbelievers enter, they will not say that you are out of your minds. You're out of your minds. The unbeliever, again, historical context type of thing. There were a lot of these pagan cults, a lot of these pagan religions that would do similar things. Therefore, if you have people leave the pagan environments, come into the Corinthian church, and they see Christians doing similar things, they will think that they are out of their mind. They will think that Christians are crazy. And they will think that Christians are kind of just a spin-off of paganism. Because it kind of was. For Corinth, it kind of was. So there's an association there that is not good. It's problematic. And so he's pointing it out. He's kind of putting it on blast. 24. If all prophecy and an unbeliever or outsider enters, he is convicted. He is convicted. He is called to account by all. The secrets of his heart are disclosed, and so, falling on his face, he will worship God. Prophecy supplying some kind of benefit, again, is what he's saying. That there's a possible problem with people coming into the church and witnessing tongues because they can't get anything out of it. They'll make an assumption about it. And it'll usually not be a positive one because there are connotations. For Corinth, there was connotations of paganism. For us today, there are connotations of crazy people. Well, in most scenarios, you see these people falling and flailing like a fish and babbling. You think they're all insane. And you're like, okay, Christians in general are insane. At Corinth, there was the concern of paganism. With prophecy, what he's trying to push is that there's a benefit. There's something to gain. You're attaining something from it. Therefore, conviction would follow. He would be called to account or judged. The secrets of his heart would be disclosed, and then falling on his face, he would be saved, is what he's saying. He will worship God, he will be saved. He will come to know God in a salvific sense. Okay, orderly worship. This is the last little bit. This is the bit about women. So let me see if I miss anything real quick. Someone in a group spoke in tongues, and I understood what it meant somehow. And after a small group, we told each other that we understood him, and it was literally the same word for word. It was too much. So my question would be like, then, so do you and your husband both believe then that like that's your gift? Is that kind of the conclusion that you guys came to? Sounds to me like Mystic and her husband understood what the person speaking in tongues said. Yeah, that is what it sounds like. That experience put a damper on how I navigate understanding tongues because I grew up believing it wasn't like that at all. Yeah, see, and it's interesting. You're not the only person I've heard you're not the only person that I respect who's told me a story like that where I don't believe you're lying. That's why it adds to what I also just the reality with scripture is that you just don't have it either way. There just isn't enough. There's a lot to indicate that it's a real thing. There's not enough to indicate what the hell it actually is. There's not enough to actually put rules on how it works. So if the church puts rules on how it works, they are lying. They are making shit up, which is fine, I guess. If you're going to use it as a church, you kind of have to just decide how you're going to use it. But to say you're using tongues biblically means you're a liar because there just isn't enough there. I'm very confident of that. And I'm always very honest when I'm like, well, it could be this or it could be that. I don't quite know enough to be, I'm super confident about this. There is not enough. Meaning, if you're going to do away with tongues, you can't say that's biblical. And if you're going to accept tongues as a church, you also can't say that you understand biblically how to do it by rules that are in the Bible because they don't exist. In a cohesive sense, they don't exist. We have some guidelines, but they're conflicting, and we have nothing else. So each church body, which is really dangerous, kind of has to decide, like, we believe tongues this way, that it is real, and it functions the way that Pentecostals and Charismatics believe. And we're going to set kind of these parameters on it. And I suppose, like, pray on it as a body and really try to, you got to be really honest and kind of assess the situation as you go. And that's the best you can do. That's it. I don't know. It's tough. I'd like to hear various Pentecostals take on it. I just don't see the application. Kind of like astrology. Where is the mechanism? Where is the purpose? Yeah, which is kind of what Paul's saying here too, is that of all the gifts, tongues is kind of almost the least important. It's kind of got very little value. It has value from what Paul says in very specific circumstances. And even then, Paul would rather you teach someone something in 5 words then babble in tongues for 10,000. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't speak in tongues, because he said specifically that you should. But he really, really made a point that it's like way down on the list of important spiritual gifts, which really makes sense. Because if you're talking about teaching versus speaking in tongues, which is going to edify and build up the body more? There's no competition whatsoever. Speaking in tongues is not going to do that in any way that is even remotely similar to somebody teaching a bunch of people about the gospel or about God or theology or something. It's not even comparable. Paul is so out of pocket, but no one else was. So he was like, guess I gotta be. If I find out it was real this whole time, I'm gonna feel real dumb. I don't know, dude. That's why I'm very much in the middle, because I think it's real to some degree. We don't have it, dude. We don't have enough to be confident, which really pisses me off. That's like the only way I function is with confidence, and we just don't have it. But there is enough in the Bible to make a good case that it exists to some degree. As much as I do not like it, it is there, and you have to be honest about it. It's really, really hard to say speaking in tongues is just interpreting different languages, because there's enough to say that that's probably not all that it was. It's really tough. It's very tough. Too real, Ghost. I think it's real, but we don't understand the mechanism of it. I think some. See, that's the thing, is I think some people do. I don't. I think the people who have honestly engaged in it, I think they do understand the mechanism. I think the people who don't have it and who don't have the ability to understand it, I think they don't. And that is kind of what Paul is saying when he says, like, it really only helps you. It doesn't really build up the body. Therefore, I'd rather you do this or this or this or this or this, but still speak in tongues. I'd rather you do all of these other things first and more, but still speak in tongues. That's why, like, the people who do it understand the mechanism, I think, based on both the Bible and just kind of general logic. But I think everybody else, it's irrelevant, which is why it's not high on the list of importance. That's all my opinion, to be clear. Oh no, we didn't come to any conclusion except we should move on. Jesus. Maybe the babblers that roll around and act crazy like smoke screens to hide the real stuff. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think that stuff is more demonic or just people being attention seekers. In my opinion. The people who flail around like fish and babble, they want attention, they want money. I think that's it. Or they're just crazy, delusional. I think it could be a mixture of the three. Blessed are they that have not seen any spectacular manifestation and yet have believed. Yeah, which is a valid point. And that's kind of why I've progressed over the years to a point of being neutral with the whole tongues thing. It has to exist. If you believe the Bible, it has to some degree. It has to. To what degree does how it work? What is the mechanism? Good luck. Good luck, baby. But honestly, my husband has shown me to be so laid back and adaptable to everything, because his philosophy is, it's not like I can control it, so why freak out? If I need to know, it will come to me. I think that's a fair way to approach it. Yeah. Nat said, I'm jealous of you and your husband. Mystic, teach me your ways. I think it'd be stressful. And also, like, when you actually read about it in the Bible, you see kind of how insignificant it is comparatively. I think it has to be significant, like, very specifically, right? Like, there will probably be a time in your life or two where there's a very specific situation and circumstance where tongues is used. And, like, that's all it was for. It was for that one thing. And then beyond that, that's it. Which is just, it's interesting. And I don't think it's just for tongues. I think there are people who, like, their gift goes completely unused, and then all of a sudden there will be a specific instance where that gets brought in for some reason. If enough stuff happens back to back in your life, I guess you got to be chill or your head will explode. That is totally true. Acts 2 is where a lot is provided on the topic related to the Holy Spirit and Pentecost. Yes. Acts is where everything is provided. We did Acts a long time ago, so we'll go through Acts again in the near future. Because even 1st and 2nd Corinthians, the number of references to Acts are very, very, very high. So just so much of the New Testament in general is connected to Acts that if you don't really have a firm grasp on Acts, I don't know how you understand most of the New Testament, honestly. Like contextually, I don't know how you could grasp a lot of it other than like very surface level. I mean, where was this speaking in tongues gift in the Old Testament anyway? I don't remember reading about it though. Yeah, which is a fair point. Although like spiritual gifts in general weren't really a thing. It was kind of a new wave, the way thing, where they decided to get all spiritual and stuff, you know? Joe, I just meant how not to be a ball of anxiety. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, that I agree with then. Yeah, I'm so glad I'm not like that. I'm like one of the most unbothered people you'll ever meet in your life. All right, last bit. And then we're going to wrap up and get out of here. Orderly worship, the part to piss you off. What then, brothers? When you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Let all things be done for building up. Again, love it. Building up. If any speak in a tongue, let there be only 2 or at most 3, and each in turn, and let someone interpret. So there's some of your instruction, right? It conflicts already with some things that we've just read tonight, and does conflict with some other things throughout the Bible. But again, it still is talked about. It's maybe Paul didn't fully grasp how to use it. I don't know. But there's some of where people get the direction from. If any speak in a tongue, let there be only 2 or 3 at most, because you'll see people doing it together, right? And each in turn, and let someone interpret. But if there is no one to interpret, let each of them shut up. Let each of them keep silent in church and speak to himself and to God. So, if you cannot benefit, if the body cannot benefit from the speaking in tongues, he's telling them to keep their mouth shut. Let each of them keep silent in church and speak to himself and to God. So pray silently. If you don't have somebody there to use it to edify the body, which is more proof that spiritual gifts are not for you. They are for the body, and that is all. Otherwise, he wouldn't say that. And it's one of a dozen indications that that is the absolute reality. 29. Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others weigh what is said, which I really like. Let them weigh what is said. Don't just believe what is said. Let them weigh what is said. Let other people decide, think about, consider, pray on what the prophets said. They are not the mystical, magical speakers of truth. They are to be completely checked by other people. If a revelation is if a revelation is made to another sitting there, let the first be silent. So the person with the gift of speaking in tongues. If a revelation is made to another sitting there, let the first be silent. For you can all prophesy one by one, so that all may learn and all be encouraged. And the spirit of prophets are subject to prophets. Interesting is that he said, and the spirits of prophets are subject to prophets. It's a really odd use of the word spirits, contextually and otherwise. It's weird. It doesn't quite fit. He might be talking about like the actual prophet's spirit or the Holy Spirit himself or the spiritual gift of the prophet. It's unknown because there wasn't enough. And then the way it comes across in English, I feel like they just tried to make it readable because it wasn't clear. It doesn't really matter. Just another kind of odd, interesting thing. So you could have three meanings, to be specific, three meanings of what the actual use and context of spirit was there. It doesn't really change. It doesn't really matter. But just an odd thing. It's one of the odd uses of a word in context. Scott says, it seems like there was a lot of ambiguity and misunderstanding in Corinth as there is today. Has anything changed? Yeah, exactly. Agreed. I literally just used DoorDash. What? Oh, Mystic said they also didn't have DoorDash. So maybe they're hangry on top of it all. Yeah, I don't know. Today's church is exactly like Corinth, in my opinion. I mean, in my opinion, honestly, it's probably worse. It's probably like a lot worse in reality. It's probably a lot worse. If we could actually compare, I'd put money on it for sure. In terms of sin and spiritual health, I bet it's a lot worse. 33. For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as I perpetually confuse you all. As in all churches of the saints, the women should keep silent in the church, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission, as the law also says. So, I want to read something else to you real quick. If the function here with women in the church is the rule for all churches of the time, if it was the rule for all churches of the time, then Paul is specifically forbidding women from speaking in the church, especially in context during worship service, like during the gathering, and is likely doing so for a specific reason, period. A specific reason for also their time, their culture, and their specific church. We've talked about this a lot. I feel like we've gone over this many, many times. But again, through some of it again. He also may be addressing a very, very specific problem among just their church. So it could be specifically to the churches of the time because of cultural things, essentially, Greco-Roman things specifically, but it would umbrella over all of the churches of the time. It could also specifically be just to Corinth because, again, similar to tongues, we don't really get clear indication other places that this is a hard and fast rule. There is some, but just like tongues, there's not really enough. If you're being honest and unbiased, there's not really enough. Here, he may be applying this rule to the women at Corinth who were speaking in tongues or speaking in prophecy in an inappropriate or obnoxious way. I'm trying to select words very intentionally, and not because I have like hot takes on this. I don't. I guess that would be the best way to say it, is that one of the other options being that women are using spiritual gifts in an inappropriate manner during service and interrupting, which is more or less where I lean personally, is that it seems that it's not a hard and fast rule that women aren't allowed to talk in church. It doesn't, one, it doesn't really make sense. Two is that it would make perfect sense if it was applied to all women of the culture. I wouldn't be surprised by that. But what that mean is that that wouldn't translate across the exegetical bridge to today. So it would have been cut off somewhere in history. If it was just a cultural, if it was a Greco-Roman thing, a first century thing, that women weren't supposed to talk in church, that would make sense. That wouldn't translate to today at all. That means it's not a biblical thing. He's addressing culture. He's not addressing a biblical standard or a spiritual or godly standard. It was just a first century thing. I could also see that he's addressing a specific particular issue at Corinth, at their congregation. We also know, due to recent context, that spiritual gifts are being used inappropriately. So I think it's also it's a valid possibility that not only is it cultural, that women perhaps were not permitted to speak in church, not for sure, but perhaps were not permitted to speak in church. It could have also been that if then they did use spiritual gifts in an inappropriate, obnoxious, loud, in an interruptive, is that a word? In an interrupting way, while culture already didn't want women to speak as much as men in the church, I could definitely see why Paul would come in and be like, hey, no more talking at all. It would make sense. It would make sense. One of the other theories is that women were cross-talking in church. Therefore, they were told to stop and to be quiet. There's less of a biblical basis for it, but I guess I get the theory. I just don't know where. There's just no really good case for that. I think there are good cases for the rest. I think it's a hard kind of sell on that. But if you combine all of it together, it makes sense. The culture in and of itself was predominantly men in positions of hierarchy, women being submissive, quieter, more what's the word I'm looking for? More soft spoken, probably spoken general, less. Just that's how the world worked at the time. It was a different time. And then especially knowing that they're having issues with spiritual gifts, specifically one where you're babbling loudly during service, I think it's a pretty decent guess that women were interrupting service at Corinth, not everywhere. I don't think there's enough to apply it everywhere. I think it's another one of these things that's just Corinth. Personally, these are my opinions. But to me, that makes pretty decent sense. To be clear, though, this has nothing to do with women in leadership. I just want to be very super clear about that. This has nothing to do with women being pastors, preachers, ministers. I personally think there is a lot of biblical backing behind men and women have different purposes and placements. I assume everybody knows. I have pretty confident opinions on those that are unlikely to change. But in this context of where women are to not talk in church, I think it was really specific. How about a topic night on the Holy Spirit? I think discussing spiritual gifts fits perfectly with this theme. Well, yeah, I think that'd be great. That'd be great. That'd be a good one, yeah, for sure. It seems there was a lot. Oh, we already read that. High spirits in a material world. And the ideas of prophets are subject to prophets. Paul would have hated the view. Good God. What a coincidence. DoorDash just delivered some radical Chinese food. Is that the name of the Chinese place? We also don't need to be reminded to not sound gongs. Context, baby. I'm going to skip the ad. Sorry if somebody got it. Gen Z translation. Paul would have hated the Broski report. What is the Broski report? Is that a real thing? The Broski report? Or are you being sarcastic? I cannot tell. The way I see it, the prophetic act is random from or induced by the Holy Spirit to whoever it pleases. My opinion is that it manifested out of specific necessity of an individual. Yeah, see, I lean there. I lean with Mikkel. Don't get him started on with those two Christian women. What? What two Christian women? Since I'm a boomer, I had to look up the... Yeah, I have no idea what the Broski report is. Is that a real thing? Joe, since you're a boomer too, you'd know Brittany Broski as... No, see, I've heard of Kombucha Girl. I have no idea who that is. I've heard that, like, name. I've never seen anything. I've never read anything. I don't know what she looks like. I assume it's a girl. Brittany Broski. Yeah, but I have no idea who that is. Is this something that is worth my time to look at or no? I assume no. I'm going to assume a hard no. Is she going to make me stop drinking kombucha out of spite? I like kombucha. So is this going to ruin my relationship with kombucha? Because I'm not down for that. I have enough problems. I don't need kombucha being ruined for me by some broski. Some baby girl broski. All of a sudden, this is getting out of hand. I love teaching my internet dad about Gen Z culture. Jesus Christ, I'm old. Ugh. The spirit of the baby girls. God. No, Joe, not at all. It's a total brain rot just for the funsies. I mean, is it like a YouTube person? Is it like a blog? Is it a video game? It's so entertaining. Keep going. It's not entertaining. All right, God. What is Kombucha Girl? All right, we're all about to learn something. So everybody sit tight, and then I gotta go. I gotta go put my kid to bed. But first, is this gonna get me banned on YouTube? Oh wait, I have seen this girl's face. I have seen this girl's face. Wait a minute. Can I play? Oh, it's TikTok. I'll get a copyright strike. Is there music in it? I don't make any money anyways. I don't care. Whatever. Oh, it's not gonna play. Hold on. Hold on, y'all. Hold on. We're gonna make this happen. And then I need to go.
It really smells like...
Oh, it's not gonna work. Why is it not working?
Like a public restroom.
Oh shoot. It's working for you guys. Hold on. I got it. I'm not tech savvy.
It really smells like a public restroom. It smells like a public restroom. You know what? No. Well.
Is that it? Is that her whole personality? Is that one video? Is that who that is? Am I now up to speed on Kombucha Girl? Or is there more to her? Did she become an icon after this? Did it become something else at all? What is the story? Forgive me, chat, for my sins. Yeah, I have seen her face before. I don't think I've ever seen the video, though. And Joe, I just turned 30, so I don't think you're literally old enough to... No, I'm definitely not old enough to be your dad, then. So what is the Broski report? Did this Kombucha Girl make a TV show? God damn it. I have to look all this crap up. I want to go to bed. I'm old. It's 8:30. I'm normally in bed. Here is the broski report. I spelled broski wrong. It is. It's this girl who became a YouTube star after she called kombucha garbage water. And that is how you know we are going to go into a recession. Does everybody understand that? I hope everybody has really listened to me over the past year when I've said we are going to go into a recession, the likes of which 2008 would laugh at. This is why. The currency will become debased, and I will say, I was right, I was right, I was right. Because there is no effing way society continues on, baby girl, chugging along while fucking kombucha girl has a broski report and probably makes 5 times what I make, if not more. This is the beginning of a societal collapse, my friends, is the broski report and kombucha girl. It's the beginning of the end. First time I've seen her, Mikkel said. Literally, I'm frazzled. Yes, she's a huge YouTuber now, and she's moved away from the kombucha thing. She's moved away from the kombucha thing. Jesus God. And to think some of us are like getting up at 4 a.m. and working until very late. And this kombucha girl is just making millions of dollars. Society is over. The compound needs to happen soon. Joe asks 10 questions. Also, Joe doesn't read chat. I can't keep up. Here's the thing. If I was to sit here and read all this crap, you guys would just be staring at silence. I have to like try to catch as much as I can. I'm not a streamer, y'all, so I'm gonna do the best I can, but I'm not gonna read it all. So if there's something important that I need to see, I expect you to slam it in the chat like 5 times back to back, so I find it, so I can find it there. That's what I need. I need help. I'm not built for the streaming life, you know. I don't make millions of dollars. I ain't got time to figure out how to use Night Owl and shit. I just don't have it. Lilith's first time seeing Kombucha Girl too. She has an internet show about weekly where she just talks about internet culture and go, oh yeah, there's no way in hell I would ever watch that. Not a chance. My eyelids started jumping. I think she just does facial reactions to anything. That would make sense because it was her reaction that made that video, amusing. Joe sees Brittany Broski. This is why we know we're going into a recession. Brittany would pee her pants laughing. It's true. That is why these fucking thumbnails I'm looking at. This is a recession. This is what that looks like. If I could plot these on a trading view chart, you would see a recession in the future. There would be a Wyckoff pattern and then a breakdown into a recession. Exactly what it looks like. It looks like a girl wearing cat ear beanies and doing Shrek reviews. This is the end of civilized society. Pastora, pray for us. I agree. Soul crushing. Agreed. Joe, can I use BNVC and read everything in chat for you? Actually, that would be great. Yeah, that would be great. Even if you just like hung out in there, and then if I miss something important, you can just cut me off and tell me. Yeah. That would be great. I assume you were joking and being sarcastic and being a jerk. That actually sounds really great to me. That sounds very helpful to me, so I don't feel like I'm missing everything. I think Joe would have a heart attack and die if he saw Trixie. Okay, I'm not Googling anything else. I'm not, I want to know who they are. I'm Googling these girls, and then we are getting off. Trixie and Katya's podcast. Not a chance, girl. No. Bald and beautiful. What poison are you people inhaling into your mind? Do we need to do Bible study every single night? Does this need to become an everyday thing? I'm learning that you all need help. Like bad.
It'd be nice.
What?
It'd be nice if it was every day.
I agree. I'm worried about these young ladies and their entertainment intake. Bald and Beautiful. What is this?
I completely understand. Some of the podcasts my wife listens to are terrifying. It's always like the most upbeat thing too. It'll be true crime. It's like, let's talk about a murder of a family of 4, my spooky ghost girlies.
Yeah.
And they just go like they're talking about like high school drama, and it's like, oh my god, this is horrendous.
Yep. Cat's all into that stuff too. 2 beautiful biological Christian women. I know you're lying. Nah. I know you're lying, because that is not the reality of what I see on the screen. Okay, so this is 2 men who are now women. Cat just yelled at me from downstairs. Something about no, I'm not. The Honksters. Nightly Bible study. Look, if nightly Bible study will get you lovely young ladies to not watch this shit, I will figure out a way. It'll be like an 11 p.m. Central Time. Just drag queens. Why? For what purpose? What are you learning from them? The Bald and Beautiful with Trixie and Katya. There's no way. Why Katya? These are 2 white American men, are they not? Trixie is definitely a white hooker name, so that's fine. But Katya is like a Russian hooker name. So which of these white men is a Russian hooker? I feel like you guys always derail Bible study into something that is no longer allowed to be called a Bible study. Now I'm talking about hookers, but I guess the Bible has hookers.
Yeah.
Never mind. We're safe.
She covers quite a bit in terms of how you'd say it, relatability.
Fair enough.
I was wondering, I know I'm really late on it. I had to mow my lawn before the city burnt it down and salted it. If you wanted to hear the story of how my wife and I met.
Yeah, actually, that'd be a great thing to end this on, because I got to go put my kiddo to bed. But yes, I want to hear this. So tell us the story.
So, how do I start? I got it. It was around sophomore or junior year of high school. This is the beforehand, but this is generally important context. Went to a youth group, met a girl. We dated for 6 months. She cheated on me on my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And that led to, oh God, it was terrible. I got a punching bag that it used to be white canvas, and now it's a lot of red. But it was after that, got into some bad habits, bad stuff happened, kind of self-destructed because I was really angry or whatever. But it was after that, and during the lockdowns, I'd say about, excuse me, Charlotte, my kid's teething, so I'm gonna run outside. I'm sorry, Charlotte. But it was during the lockdowns that I started playing that game called Barotrauma. Submarine, a bunch of nerds on it, and the public servers were just absolutely atrocious because all they do is try to ruin the game for everyone else. And I met Rose on that, playing for 8 hours a day because nobody does schooling online.
What's it called again?
Barotrauma, Barotrauma. You'll have to look up the game because it is so small, you'll only come up with the definition for the word still, I think.
I got it. I'm showing everybody. Continue your story.
It's such a fun game. But so I made her on that, and I was running public servers. And to this day, I am still a niche celebrity on that game. I will join public servers, and no matter what it is, someone will go, holy crap, it's hot, dude. Like, it's been so long. What's going on? And I have an entire Discord server full of people that I've made friends with on that. But so Rose and I start talking on Barotrauma. We start playing a lot more. She's on every server I host. And she is the glue that holds that boat together because everybody else is absolutely stupid. I did so amazing in the military because I was already really, really good at tard wrangling with that game. And she was the only one who helped me with that. because she was supposed to be security who runs the guns and everything, but she would fix the ship. She would make sure the reactor's going, all of that stuff. And so then we started talking on Discord, actually. And it was like, I believe a year or so after we met and we're like playing Barrow together, we started talking on Discord. I told her I liked her. And then I figured out I was going to go to the Coast Guard, so I wanted to visit her for my birthday. And this is after a year or so of talking. Understand that during this time, this woman has not sent me she sent me one picture of her face. She did not do voice calls and she did not do FaceTime. So I walk up to my dad like a 17-year-old kid. I just got into cross country, just got out of Dairy Queen, still working off all those free blizzards. And I go tell my dad, like, hey, I really like this girl. She's out I think she was working in Denver as a barista at the time. She's out in Denver. So I'm going to go take a red-eye train like overnight to go see her. And he just looks at me and he goes, have you ever met this girl before in real life? And I was like, no. Have you ever heard her voice? I was like, no. Has she ever sent you a picture? I was like, just the one. And he's like, you're going to get your kidneys stolen or Chris Hansen's going to jump out of the weeds and beat you to death with a tire iron. And I was like, tell you what, I'm heavy enough. I don't think they could carry me off. So I'm going to, as long as it's just her, I'll make it. And halfway through that train ride, she texts me, hey, my 2 friends are coming with me to help with the drive. That's enough people to carry me off. So I start making my peace with God. And I get off the train. I make it to the terminal on Denver. And she steps out of the car. And the one thing I always love saying the most is that I'm very glad we started dating online because she knows I love her for her personality, not just because she is smoking hot and can cook like Ramsay. Because that first night, she made orange chicken from scratch. And I almost proposed right then and there.
Oh my
And
God.
we are now on our 4th anniversary this year. And the best part about that was we drove back to her parents' house. So I had to sleep on their couch. I thought we were staying in Denver. And that night, her mom sent up the bat signal for every threatening looking male relative possible. Every cousin, uncle, grandparent. The first time I met her grandpa, he was like, oh God, should I get the shotgun? And, I survived somehow.
That's wild.
It is awful because the probability is so staggering. I can't give out dating advice. I met my wife on this really tiny multiplayer video game on a submarine. So it's really like, hey, dude, it worked out for me. Maybe you too can get struck by lightning. Like,
Yeah, I mean, but video games, you could give general video game dating advice.
yeah.
What?
Oh, I suppose the other positive thing is my brother was 27, didn't date that much, was super bitter. And I made a bet with him that if I marry this girl and it works out, you have to go to online dating. And it's one that you have to pay for. Because that's my whole plan is like, if you have trouble, date, you pay for a dating site. Because much like if we're talking about video games, like much like how Fortnite drew all of the 12-year-old insufferable children to Fortnite instead of like all these other games,
Right.
Tinder did the same thing for women you don't want a long-term thing with. They can get what they want for free. Why would they pay for a yearly subscription? And she has now been married for 3 years, I think.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Every time he tries to talk crap, I bring up like, who got you married? Who got you on that dating site where you met your wife? Oh, me? Oh, wow. Very, very grateful of you.
That's so funny, man. That is so
But
wild.
no,
Probability.
it is. Oh, dude, if I were in a foxhole, I'd convert right then and there. Like,
yeah, for sure. You'd have to. That's so freaking wild. Good God.
right?
Everybody's saying it's very romantic. This is true
Oh, no,
romance. Leap of faith.
Yeah, no, I could have gotten murdered, but my child desperately wants me to hang out with her. So I suppose I have to go. Speaking of, yeah, we hit 4 years and we have a kid. And speaking of, I should go take care of her.
Yeah,
I'm very glad I got
take care of her.
Story. My favorite
Go
thing.
take care of her. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Later, man. All right, everybody else, I'm out. We went 2 hours because I am really bad at not doing that. Yeah, I'm gonna change the title of the video to the last 2 minutes. Couple meets on submarine video game. I bet we'll get more views because that's how the internet works. Mystic said this is how her and her best friend met over the video games, the Discord, because Mystic is queen of the Discord, and just met in real life for the first time last month. That's crazy. I risked being murdered to be with Joe. That's more true than even Kat knows. But certainly more true than anybody else knows. And don't assume that you know what I mean, because you don't. But you might. But also you might not. All right, I'm out. I gotta go put kid to bed. I love you all. This was interesting, as usual. I guess I should just be glad that it didn't derail into memes about me. That's the bright side. Because I am Mr. Brightside. You're forgiven for the brain rot. Kind of. But I am worried about a couple young ladies' spiritual health. So I will work very, very hard over the next couple of months to get where we need to be so that we can do this more often, even if it's shorter, because you all need Jesus real bad, and I intend to give him to you. So with that, good night. Love you guys. Bye.